Hello and welcome to Consciously Awesome Live here on Soulivity TV. I'm your host, Sheila Applegate, and we are all about helping you find your brilliance and remodel our world. My guest today is one of the most impactful teachers of my life, and I have the honor of having her as my daughter. So please welcome Sheila Applegate. Sheila, at the age of 14, was the host of Our Voice Now radio show, discussing spirituality, culture, politics, and humanity. And in 2017, she was a speaker at the Seneca Falls Women's March. She also helped to implement the social media campaign for that march. She currently lives in Los Angeles, where she works with homeless services and is passionate about social equality and justice. Sheila spends her free time researching how systems of oppression are upheld and how we can work to dismantle them. And she has a monthly newsletter where she shares these researches with others. So welcome, Sheila.
Thanks for having me.
Well, of course, it's my honor. I'm so glad you're here. I can't wait to hear everything that you have to share with us today. So let's get started.
Sure, yeah.
You are so, you really are like, we both know you really spend all of your free time, especially during the pandemic.
Yeah, a lot of my free time.
A lot of your free time, and an exorbitant amount.
I did watch most seasons of The Nanny this weekend, but I also
okay, good balance there. Those things are important.
Yes, a lot of my free time is spent researching this stuff.
Yeah, which has really been something you've been doing for most of your life in some form, but really, I think. Even more so over the last year. So how do you see the skills you learned? So you grew up with me, right? And in a house with spirituality is kind of a forefront. So all of those spiritual practices that you learned, how do you think they influence the social change work?
Yeah, so I grew up, I would say like the prototype of Consciously Awesome is my brother being raised. So with that background, and I definitely use that stuff today in like social justice or social change work that I do. I think a lot of it is energy based. Like I think one thing that you talk about a lot is the new earth and like new earth energy and bringing it down to this earth. And I think that that's really for me, that's a twofold thing of one, like going up there, connecting with the new earth while still being in my human body and bringing that down and changing like the earth by the energy. And then also trying to raise this earth to the level of new earth. And I think that a big part of that is like, it has to be out of love. It has to be, you can't have like systems of oppression and like systemic racism and sexism and all this stuff and be new earth energy. So I think that there's like a big part of a big part of both spiritual work and social justice work are intertwined of working to like bring this world, raise this world to a higher level and then bring, or a different level, but like a more level, and then bring those levels to Earth on a wider scale across the globe and balance that off. And so that's like the big picture using it. But then there's also like small things like, we grew up doing 995 to like any food that you're cooking. I don't even actually know too much about why or what. I just remember learning it. And the past week I was making lunches for unhoused people in the area, and like I 995'd all that. And I again don't know exactly what that's for, but I do.
Well, let's stop here and talk about that for everybody listening. You know what? To be honest, I don't exactly even know. When I was learning early when I was studying,
I did look it up, but I still don't like.
Yeah, it is. It's numerology, but it's raising the frequency of food and helping it to be more nourishing. You know, we put Reiki symbols in it as well, which you probably do too. And I honestly don't. I still 99. You do 3 circles over your food and you say 995, and it has some sort of spiritual alignment, but it's really the intention, right?
Yeah.
So by doing that, and at that core level in your language of spirit, because it came through me, even though I don't quite remember the teachings, I know who taught it and I trust them.
Yeah.
But
well, and also the Reiki symbol, that the name I don't forget, but the swirly one.
Mm-hmm.
That one, which is very similar to doing 3 circles. So it
is right. You can kind of do them all.
Yeah.
So you infuse that energy into the things you do, right? And then yeah. So now then it's really like you're not just giving the nutrients of the food, but also the spiritual nutrients, or that infusion of intent and prayer. Right?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, it'd be the same. And I would guess lots of people, when donating food and stuff, who have any type of spiritual practice, like of any religion or non-denominational, probably do something of like a prayer for it or something. So 995 is my language for that. But yeah, it's a pretty, I would say, maybe, a kind of universal thing that I'm guessing a lot of people are doing all the time and not thinking about, but
doing
it right before I think coming on the show, so I did think about it.
Right. Well, even when someone isn't thinking about it, if you're making food for the homeless people, or you're supporting in some way, your intention is in love, right? It's most likely, unless it's an obligation for high school or something. Even then, I think most people would turn to a place of infusing it, which is pretty cool. Yeah. That's awesome. I really liked your description of the vibrant new earth and the bringing that frequency here. And like you said, in my teachings, I talk about we're bringing the higher frequency of that vibrant new earth, which for people in listening that may not know that part of the teachings, but it is a place we go to in meditation, and we imagine a world beyond the limitations that we have here, where we can create it instantaneously. And so we spend time in meditation in that space, and then it influences the earth. And then, like Sarah said, when we're here, we're working to help the earth evolve so that those frequencies blend together. I love that idea, and I love that you do that. So, you know, oneness was our religion, I guess, right? I think that's a saying somewhere, but or a song lyric. Oneness is my way. But anyway, oneness has been a big part of the way, of our attention while you were growing up. So how do you think that informs your approach with social justice work?
Yeah, so I think, and I can get a little bit into like defining oneness is basically the idea of just us all being connected, and like it's like, instead of say picturing like a God that is, and it could be intertwined with God or go with it, but like a God that is separate, to more being like a collective of people, like of energies, of souls, of beyond soul, like plants, all that, of oneness, one big thing that creates life and is connected and intertwined together. At least that's how I think about oneness. And so I think once you started with the idea of we're all connected, everything is connected, there's like a couple of things that make it, when you're learning more about the world and learning and trying to figure out how you want to help it, how you want to impact it, there's things that basis like kind of leads you to do naturally, or leads you to be able to figure out of one, if we're all connected, then it's super easy to empathize with other people, to be like, oh, I don't want other people to be suffering or in pain because we're all connected. That's not like in a selfish way, that's a part of me, we're connected, but like your pain is my pain, not in a, I'm maybe going to do too many caveats, not in a like taking on other people's negative energy, but just the knowing that when there is hurt, it's going to affect you, whether it's indirect or direct. And so I think that then that's easy to be like, oh, well, I'm going to jump to, like, it's an easy jump from that to, I don't want people to hurt. How can I stop people from hurting? But even beyond that, I think understanding that when people are hurt, then you are impacted by that, indirect or direct, makes you see that as a greater picture. If there is hurt in the world, from the bottom to the top, that hurt is all the way through. So it's easy to look at the hierarchical system that we have right now and be like, oh, there's so much suffering on the bottom and so much happiness, so much like better off at the top. But I just think that is like, that can't be, because if the people at the top were so content and happy, but continue to hurt the people at the bottom, then they're not content and happy and in a good place. It's like, it's hurting them too. And the fear, knowing even the people at the top, the fear that they could be at the bottom, that's them. And it's largely because we're all connected. And the idea of oneness really brings that together of, okay, so no matter what, no matter where you are on the scale or where you feel your suffering lies, like, you're impacted when the world is unequal like it is currently. And yeah, I think that is something that lots of people have arrived to that. I'm not the first person to arrive to that conclusion, but I think having the groundwork of oneness and like having that be something that I grew up thinking about, it was maybe easier for me to make that jump, to make that conclusion than people. It also is like easier to see how all the problems are so connected. You see like strings connecting things, and it's like, yes, racism, that's bad. We know that. We need to stop that. And like climate change and how we're treating our planet, that's bad. We know that. We need to stop it. And I think a lot of people are like, oh, but those are separate problems, and one, you have to focus on one or the other. But they're connected, because the people most affected by climate change right now are largely people of color. It's largely poor communities, which shows like how capitalism and capitalism and the system of economy that we have right now is also hurting people. And like, you can't dismantle one without dismantling it all, like without breaking down it all. You can't fix one without fixing the others, because they perpetuate each other.
Right. I think that, I have so many different things to say on this. First of all, I think that I love that you just said at the end, because when we remember we can do all of this at once, and that we have to, right? It's like, I sometimes say that, ADD or multitasking is my superpower, right? Because I can concentrate on multiple things at one time. And I think you're saying the same thing. Like, it's not just that we can, and not, like, yes, some people might be more passionate about one part of it, but the realization that you have to look at the macro picture and the micro picture at the same time in order to make changes. And which means that in a lot of ways, no matter what our passions are, we do need to work together in order to make that change. I also like in early when you were talking, you mentioned like when you know that you're in oneness and you realize that you're feeling this pain and suffering from someone else, you want to make a difference. And it made me think that there are people who who talk about empathy as something that they want, being empathic, feeling others' feelings. And some people turn to protect themselves from it instead of make a change. So I think that is something we can choose. And maybe if there's somebody who is feeling like they have to protect themselves, realizing, wait, if I take action, maybe that would make me feel better, is a really good point that you made.
I also have recently been more cautious about using empathy. I did just use it then, and I think that the oneness and the initial reaction of a lot of this is empathy and like, oh, I'm starting to feel your feelings. But I think it was Jane Fonda mentioned how like she started using compassion instead of empathy. Mm-hmm. Because if you are bogged down with other people's emotions, like you aren't going to be that helpful. But if you can somebody understand that, maybe not understand completely what the problem is or what like the hurt is, but see that there is hurt. And then compassion like moves you to do something about it. And I think that's one way I did use empathy, but have been more cautious recently about using empathy because some people get trapped in empathy, or I feel like empathy gets used against people sometimes. So but I think that the idea and like that the empathy isn't a good thing to have, but the step past it, what I've been kind of learning seems to be compassion or something that's actionable that isn't being so overcome with other emotions, because then it is hard. That is hard to
navigate.
Navigate and then do something about. Then you're just sort of stuck in it.
Right. And sometimes when people feel like they open up really big to that energy, then they just feel overwhelmed and can't take action. So to give them the next step of compassion is, I think, huge. Like, there's somebody out there who wanted to hear that today.
Thank Jane Fonda for that.
Yeah, thank you, Jane Fonda. Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And that we really, when we do take action, and we can take action in many different ways, the way that we're passionate, right? Like the way that we feel.
Yeah, and like when I say it's all connected, I do think that that's true, and it is all connected, but that doesn't mean like, oh, so I have to care equally amounts of everything and do all this work for everything equally. Because there's a few reasons why that's not necessary. One is there are other people working too, so they can pick up where you maybe have fault, or like not have faults, but just like where you can't focus on, other people can work on it. And like also, you would just be overwhelmed. But I think to split your focus so much can be overwhelming. But I think realizing that in whatever you are focusing on, as long as, like, if you want to focus on environmentalism and climate change and stuff, then just make sure you're taking a holistic approach to that and realizing that, oh, racism and economics and all this other stuff play into that, like classism, sexism plays into that. And who am I listening to for this thing I'm passionate about? Like, am I listening to Native social or Native climate activists or Black climate activists or people of color? Who am I taking the lead from? Who am I listening to? The communities that are being impacted.
Right. Excellent.
People who's like the chemicals are in their water and stuff. And I think, you can have the one thing you want to focus on, and just make sure that when you're focusing on that, you're seeing the big picture in that space.
I think that's excellent. Yeah. Other thing you had said a little bit ago when you were speaking, you spoke about the oneness and realizing that if somebody's in pain, like it seems like the people in the bottom of the cast, right? The people that are struggling the most for material things or for just the way of living seem to be the ones in pain, and that maybe the people who in power are the ones who are really in joy and doing great. But the realization that if they were, then they wouldn't be keeping this up, I think is a huge, huge thing to get to, because we can get just so angry and see an us versus them in that situation. And not that that isn't warranted to some degree, but when we're in oneness, we never will get past that if we don't acknowledge that the source of that misuse of power comes from pain in the same way.
Yeah. And I think that's like why I mentioned, like, I think a lot of it is, of the people at the top, I think a lot of it's fear when this system is so broken. You're like, I can have as much money as I have now, but I know that if I don't have that much money, I'm not going to be not that much. You don't need $1 billion to be looked after. You just don't. But I think if you know that the people at the bottom aren't being taken care of, then you're going to be so afraid to be at that bottom, and you're going to do what you can to keep the structures in, even though it's harmful to you. Not good for your, whether you believe in souls or not, it's not good for your psyche, your mind, to know that you have what you have because other people are in pain. And you're worried that if you fail, then you will be in pain. But if there's a system that catches the people no matter what level they're at, then there's no fear of being at the bottom because you're still safe.
Right. Yes. Perfect. All right. We're going to take a short break, and then we'll come back and have some more discussion. Thanks.
Cool.
Soulivity Magazine and Beyond Words Publishing is pleased to announce its latest charitable partner, the National Women's History Museum. Please join us in supporting this amazing organization.
Don't tell me I can't sit where I want.
Don't tell me I can't be an inventor. Don't tell me I can't be a soldier.
Don't tell me I can't be a movie star.
I am Anna Mae Wong.
I am Rosa Parks. I refuse to give up my bus seat to a white person.
I am Tabitha Babbitt. I invented the circular saw.
Don't tell me I can't fly.
Don't tell me I can't be an explorer. I am Sacagawea.
Don't tell me I can't be a scientist. I'm Gertie Teresa Corey. I won a Nobel Prize in physiology.
I am Deborah Sampson.
Don't tell me I can't open my own business. I'm Estee Lauder. I started a global empire that now has $7 billion in annual sales.
I disguise myself as a man to fight in the Revolutionary War. Don't tell me I can't be a spy.
Don't tell me I can't be a journalist.
I am Mary Elizabeth Bowser.
I'm Amelia Earhart.
I starred in over 40 films, from the silent era to the talkies.
I am Hovita Idar. I was an editor, a publisher, and I even founded my own newspaper.
During the Civil War, I was a maid for the Confederate president. He thought I was illiterate, but I actually had a photographic memory. I was shot twice in my first battle and removed the bullets myself.
These are just some of the women who have changed history. Don't let them be forgotten.
Become a member and support the
National Women's History
Museum. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook.
Please join us in supporting the National History Women's Museum. You can find out more information by going to soulivity.com/support women's history. Soulivity Magazine and Beyond Words Publishing want to remind you about the importance of continuing to follow public health guidelines to protect yourself, your loved ones, and your community. Please continue to wear a mask, wash your hands, and watch your distance. Please visit these sites for further information about how to stay safe from COVID-19 into the new year. Remember, love protects us.
Hello, welcome back. And we're here talking with Sheila Applegate on spirituality and social change. We've been having a great discussion. So Sheila, we left talking about oneness and how that affects the whole system and how it impacts social change. When, we having been growing up in this home and with the idea, the concepts, the teachings of Consciously Awesome and spirituality, and now being out on your own and learning in your own way. And I've always felt like, you should surpass me. That's the way it should be, right? Everyone should go past the generation should always go further. So have you learned anything? Have you shifted your views and changed thoughts about the spirituality as you moved out in this direction?
Yeah, I think that there's some things that, like, now that I've grown up, things that were normal to me as a kid that I'm like, maybe I should examine that more. And not that it's like wrong, but like just figuring out where it fits into the thing of life, I guess. And one of those things has been like the idea of cultural appropriation has been brought to my attention more and more aware of that. And I think that there's definitely a discussion to be had about that in the spiritual community. We grew up doing moon ceremonies and smudging with sage, with white sage, that I think was like usually given to us from like Haudenosaunee people. And we went to Haudenosaunee moon ceremonies and stuff. So I don't think that fits into cultural appropriation as much as cultural exchange. Other people can correct me on this. Like, I'm not here to say like, oh, I was fine the whole time. But I think that it is a little bit hard to discern. But I think that now that I've moved away, like I want to smudge my apartment and stuff. And like, I don't know Native people in LA yet. And if I did, I probably wouldn't be like, hey, can I get your white sage? Like, that would be a weird conversation starter. So like, yeah. And like, it's like in stores and spiritual stores that they're usually run by like white people. And I don't know how they're getting the sage or like how they're cultivating it. And I saw recently that it's in Whole Foods, like you can get white sage in Whole Foods now. And that feels wrong. Like, it feels off to me. And I have had to like reckon with, and like I said, people could say, hey, the fact that you use white sage at all, like, and smudge is cultural appropriation. And they'd be totally fair in saying that. But yeah, I think that there's a lot of things I think there's a big cultural exchange in a lot of spirituality, or maybe particularly in the way that we grew up. Like you said oneness was our religion, which maybe is a little, but I feel like we were very non-secular, but like, yeah, like new ceremonies from Haudenosaunee, or went to Gobensaden, or like experienced different people's cultural and spiritual practices, which I think is a cultural exchange, not appropriation. But I think that there are some gray areas, and there's things that I've had to think about and figure out and see where I feel it fits and what I'm comfortable with. Like, I didn't think about it growing up, or even like not even growing up, like a few years ago, being like, oh yeah, we're gonna smudge, like telling white friends who didn't grow up with it, yeah, we'll just like smudge, and like, oh, this is how you do a moon ceremony and stuff. And now I'm like, that wasn't my place to share that information. Like, it just wasn't. Like, I do think about it as part of my background and upbringing, and I think that that's fine for me to do, but I don't think that it's something that I should be like sharing with other people whose culture it's not, because I'm not close enough connected to the culture to do it, to say that. So that's definitely one thing.
Yeah, and that's interesting because I think it also has to do with having moved, right? Because here it was within a community. You were invited into each of those places and welcomed in as family, but that doesn't necessarily mean that when you go into different places. And I think, we kind of, even as you were growing up, I think there was that sense of when we're with, there was a sense of sacredness that we didn't just share with like what we were given from other cultures and invited into. We didn't just necessarily go out and share. I'm even thinking way back to when you were 4 and in preschool, and this isn't exactly it, but that discernment of sort of who do you speak to about things, because I remember you were mentioning how one of the little girls fell in the playground and you offered her Reiki because you knew that her mom also understood that, but you wouldn't have done it with the other kids because that they wouldn't have known. So I think that there was always, and that's not exactly the same, but that idea of an intent to respect, right? An intent to respect and to be welcome and to be grateful for welcoming in, because that is part of oneness, right?
Yeah. And it's not like to be gatekeeping of, only certain people can have this knowledge and stuff. I think it's just that some things aren't mine to share with other people. There's things that were shared with me aren't mine to share with more people. And
I think that's, I'm glad.
Part of the lesson. Yeah.
I think that's right.
And another thing that love growing up that I've now kind of I still, like I said, it's not like, this is now I've totally shifted my opinion on this. I think it's just added more complexity to it. Is like manifesting was always something we talked about growing up, and something that I'll still do, or the idea of manifesting and talking about manifesting things. And I think that is totally fair for that to still be a practice of mine, and maybe even talking about it some. But I think that since growing up and becoming more aware, I've also realized you can't just talk about manifesting without talking about the fact that I'm a white woman with a name that's easy to read for English speakers. I had 2 parents who went to college. We were able to move to a school that would have more had smaller class sizes, and all that also led to my accomplishments. So my hard work, accomplishments, and manifesting all plus just the privileges I was born with. And that's okay. And I think it's okay for me to say I've worked and manifested something, but it's something that it doesn't seem like you could, it's not something to be aware of when people are suggesting you can just manifest this, of just being aware of what privilege also came to you being able to manifest something and led to that. Because I think that there can be some disregarding of that privilege when you're talking about the law of attraction or manifesting, or you can just think it and then you get it. And that some of that can be true, but also what was just your background that made it easier for you to get that than somebody who wasn't born with all the same privileges as you.
Right. Yeah. I think that makes a lot of sense. That it also gets layered and complicated with things when people are talking about health, because sometimes people who have a health issue get hurt or upset because people are just saying, well, you can manifest good health. And they're here like, well, I want to live, I want to be healthy, and this is happening. And so it is those nuances, right? And looking at all aspects. And yet at the core, I think, as you're saying, that idea that where we place our attention, what vibration we live in, that does affect, and that can go across all economic and social barriers. And at the same time, if you're thinking of survival or not having those resources, that's going to be.
Yeah. I don't want to be like, oh, only the most privileged can like use manifesting. That's not, I don't think that that's true, but I would caution people talking about manifesting, like myself included.
Right.
Like, it's, if you are having trouble like affording food or affording housing, and then somebody's like, just manifest it, that you're going to be, like you said, same with the medical stuff.
Right.
If you're feeling sick and people are like, just manifest good health, it's like, okay, but that's not working. So, or I don't even have the attention to just manifest it, because it, like, the survival instincts are too strong right now.
Right. And then there's always those moments where in any of those, from health to survival, that, you know, sometimes a soul is just, you can see it in them, and that whether it was innate or whatever, but they have this energy to them where they just kind of shine, no matter what their circumstances are. And then there's people who have a lot of resources and they don't, right? They just never reach that frequency. So yeah, very nuanced. And I love that you're noticing all those and thinking about them, exploring them, and cautious of it, because we never want to hurt people with the words we say when we say that. Yeah, that's great. What about any traps? So you've really been around, not only for the people listening, not only did Sarah grow up with me in this work, but she pretty much was my cohort. She was with me in, like, I don't know, she was with me in most every speaking engagement I did, by my side, helping out, teaching Reiki when you were a child to other children. And just, so she's been in it. She's seen it. She's seen all the, gotten a drive-by from a psychic, all those things. So what do you notice now? Like, are there any traps that you notice for yourself or for other people or in the community where, with spirituality and social change, and how you integrate those two together?
Yeah, I think that there's a few things I've noticed, and not even that I haven't been guilty about them myself. And like I was just saying, like, these are things that I had to reckon with too. One thing is, I think this is the big thing, and it's not just like spirituality like we're talking about it. It's like other religions or just like internet meme culture. There's a kind of there can be a toxic positivity or just like, think about happy things, think about love, think about all this stuff, and it will be better. And all love, not fighting, peace, not fighting, and like policing other people's actions, of not even fight, but of like speaking up for themselves and stuff. I threw a lot of stuff that made themselves like go back. I'll break it down a bit more, but yeah, I think that there is like I said, it's not even just connected to spirituality. It's like a greater thing, but I've definitely noticed it in the spiritual community, that like the idea of trying to only focus on love, only focus on good things, only lift like good things, peace happening, can be really harmful when like the systems that are hurting people are so entrenched and so large and not even so entrenched and large and so like tangible and like, well, or like they're like kind of intangible and tangible at the same time, but they're so like interwoven and felt and like every day for so many people. And like when people are trying to speak up and say, oh, this is hurting me, we need to stop, and they're speaking in anger sometimes because it's angering to have a system like this. Then when people bring the attention to like, oh, kindness, and I'm not even talking about when people are like both sides saying it and being like, oh, we all have to just be kind together, but like dismissing somebody's anger and trying to just move into this like peace, kindness, happiness world is hurtful, harmful to the pain and it's stopping you from fully engaging in pain and anger and emotions that they're feeling that you are connected to, like we've mentioned with oneness. I think that it's sort of a dangerous coping mechanism to try to just focus on like positive things and not feeling it, because it's also, like we mentioned, when it's like disengaging, and then you're not going to be able to get to that compassion all the way. It's going to stop you from getting there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that, there is a false peace, maybe, right? Or a false joy, which is just not paying attention to the world around you. I mean, to me, you can, like, true joy, if you want to be like enjoying every moment, that's when you take joy in knowing that even when you're angry, that's part of oneness, part of evolution, that it can be helped, it can be used, or even when you're afraid, so it's embracing all of the emotions and using them to propel it forward, but not just ignoring it, right? Or so.
Yeah, and it's also the idea, and it's like I said, I notice it in the spiritual community because I am witness to that community, but it's other places too, that like the idea that kindness, like individuals' kindness can overcome systems of oppression it's inaccurate.
Unless every individual reached that point.
But you have to be fully, you can be a kind individual. Like, I mean, even if all the individuals in a toxic system were kind, the toxic system's still be there. And I mean, kind is also kind of a, like, maybe a not loose term of like, is kindness being nice to somebody, or is it like, if you could argue you're not fully being kind until you're working to like stop like internalized racism or your own racism, and systematic racism, and your own classism and sexism and systematic sexism and classism. But when you just say kindness, I feel like people are normally meaning it a bit more on an individual level. Or if you're not meaning it on an individual level, that's great. But if you were a little more specific of like, okay, what does kindness look like to you? How is that going to, kindness to me is partly making the lunches that I made the other day. That is a kind thing. It's also like emailing politicians when they're like trying to displace a bunch of unhoused people, and sharing the fact that politicians are trying to displace a bunch of unhoused people, so more people are aware of it. So I do think that those are all acts of kindness.
Mm-hmm.
But if you just saying kindness and not specifying what that means to you and what the actions that you're taking to reach that kindness, it loses its impact.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it seems like it's more surface, right? But it's not necessarily helpful to the individual or to the whole if we stay at a surface level with these concepts, I would say. Yeah. Interesting. Any other sort of?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely the one thing that I've noticed. I think that there also is like maybe I think that, well, it's kind of connected, but I think the idea of disassociating with well, like we've talked about disassociating with negativeness and stuff, but also the idea of like, oh, I'm like doing energy work, which like I said, I do that too. That's a big part of the work that I do. But then to use that as an excuse for why you're not engaged with the like human work can sometimes feel, it just, to me, it's like the combination is so much more powerful. If you combine them, then
that would be
so it's not, I guess, a trap, but it's just like, yeah, the combining them is great.
Well, try this.
Yeah.
And I notice, like, for me, there's times we talk about kind of moving up and down the frequencies of the vortex, the different energies where we put our attention. And so sometimes I feel guided to put more attention in the physical world. And then sometimes I feel more guided that I'll be more effective by putting my attention up in the higher frequencies, which would be more meditation and doing different things like that. And we do all have different specialties, but I mean, I think that in some way, just even by watching, like by me taking my spiritual work and making it a career and making an effort to put it out there and do tangible things to help people learn, that's kind of the same reflection. And then also social change and giving people voices and all of that. But I think that sometimes it's always important we came to Earth for a reason, I think, right? Like if we wanted to just, or we're not a monk on a mountain anymore, So I think I love the idea of integrating. So you're right, not a trap, just a great suggestion. It's way more fun to be human and spiritual at the same time.
Right. And like what I do doesn't have to be what you do on the human level, not even the
universal you, I guess.
It doesn't have to be the same and stuff. I just think that it's always better to take the more times you can combine the energy meditative work with the humanness work, then the stronger it'll be.
Yeah, awesome. So if somebody was listening today and just got inspired by that and said, I want to do more, what would you suggest to get started if they weren't really focused on social change?
There's a few things. So I mentioned, I think you mentioned, I have a monthly newsletter that goes out each month. I'll pick a different topic and I talk a little bit about why I think it's important, but mostly it's just resources I found, podcasts, news articles, video clips, things like that. And so plugging, that's a good start. You can sign up for that. we can do the link in the description. But the thing, I always put an action on those, and it's been a few months now, and I noticed the actions always are basically one of two things. So it's either self-inventory, self-reflection on how you interact, or where you are in the space of how much you've engaged with it, what you can, just kind of where you're at and where you can do better. So those are for more specific topics, so it's easier for me to give you questions on that. I do suggest, but I could give you some like broad questions, maybe just like more generally on new topics of like things that you can do self-reflectively of, if there's something either new you're learning about or something you're interested in that you want to be more involved with, the things that to do your own inventory, things that I would kind of ask myself would be like, first of all, what do I know about this topic already? And where did I get that information from? Or what do I think I know about this topic already? And where did I get that information from? A lot, like, I went to education in America. I thought I knew a lot of things that I did not know there. And so, like, first asking yourself that question, asking yourself how can I look at this and maybe find new information that is different from what I already have? Who can I look to that might have information outside of the bubble that I had on this before? Also asking, how are you impacted by that subject, and who is the most impacted by that subject, and are you listening to them? That's like the biggest thing. Listen to the people who are most affected by whatever thing that you're like interested in. Like, what it can be climate change, it can be anti-Blackness, it can be racism, immigration, whatever it is, listen to the people who are most affected. And like that's a good starting place. So once you've asked those types of questions, like, you have a much better idea of just where you're coming at it, and you should have like a better idea of where you can go forward. And then the other thing so it's one of two. So the second thing that I'm always suggesting is find the people, the local to your community, already organizing for this, whatever it is, because they are there, they exist, they've been doing it for a long time, so they know what they're talking about, they know where you can be most helpful. And it's really just the best way. You're going to have the biggest impact in your local community, and you're going to have more impact listening to the people who have already been doing the work. And in my newsletter, I do usually, I have mostly people from Central New York area and LA area, so I always link resources to those two places. I have people from I share their places, other people too. So I do try to connect national things that will also connect, or international too. I try to go wide and small. No matter what your like new passion is, or the new field that you want to be focusing on, there are people close to you that already are doing the work. So, and maybe it isn't in your town, maybe, but if it's not in your town, it'll be the town over, and you can listen to them and then find, or it doesn't even have to be like local, like physical communities, like your community, your broader community as well. But yeah, if you don't know what to do, find the people who've been doing it, ask how you can help them, and learn from them.
I love that. First of all, I want to say I really recommend the newsletter because Sarah's my go-to person. Sarah and Justin. If I have questions about what's going on in the world these days, usually going to Sarah or my son Justin will be able to cover most of the topics. But it's just so easy because you love doing the research, and then we get the best articles or podcasts and ready to let us learn without having to go search or wonder, if it's a good
And I will say, I do love doing the research. When I did one on white supremacy, that was hard research. That wasn't.
Yeah. Right.
But
it is.
So
I mean, it's hard to listen to
things.
some of them, but you did all the work behind it and just gave us what we really needed.
You guys only had to watch one video. I had to watch 4.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. But I don't know if I enjoy researching white supremacy, but I enjoy having the knowledge to do more later.
Right. That's wonderful. And then you also mentioned, going to people who have already been doing the work. I was thinking multi-generational, right? Like for me, going to your generation is helpful because you have a new perspective than people that were around me. And I've been approached by multiple people my age who are saying, Sarah's my go-to person for this information because she understands it in a way that I don't. And she puts the new language to a definition that I can relate to and understand. So, both ways, I think. I think if we can work together multi-generationally, we can have an incredible impact.
Yeah. I will say a lot of the people that I think of that are doing the work are close to my age. I think it might even just be like a energy level thing or not energy, but when you're younger, you have more of the, I hope that it stays with everybody, but you have at least more time and energy to be like, I'm going to organize this thing.
Right.
So,
that is true.
Yeah. I actually like a lot of the local organizations that I think they're maybe a little bit older than me, but that I contributed to are usually around my age, but that's not always the case. And yeah, I don't think that there's no age limit to helping. It's listening to people who are, and a lot of people who are established may be young, but did learn from other people before them.
Right. Yeah, I think we have to some degree. We're in the oneness, why would we not?
Yeah.
That's the whole point of oneness. Awesome, Sarah. It's been amazing having you here. Any final things that you'd like to say before we end?
I don't think so. Really, I said a lot. Be kind to each other beyond just the word kind. Figure out what kind means to you.
Beautiful. Nice. I love it.
I think I'm stealing from Ellen, but I'm going with
it. All right. Thank you, everyone. A big shout out to Brian for producing this show, and to Soulivity TV and magazine for allowing us to be a part of it. And be sure to look in the description for the information to subscribe to Sarah's newsletter. We will see you all next week. Have a wonderful week.